From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here.
Just as Rocky got in the ring with Apollo Creed's kid, composer Joseph Shirley has finally gotten his title match, not only literally delivering a knockout score for Creed 3, but also for the Star Wars Legacy series, The Book of Boba Fett, and The Mandalorian. Rising up the ranks through numerous shorts and segueing from copyist to engineering and synth programming, it was Shirley's stewardship under Academy Award-winning composer Ludwig Göransson on such scores as Black Panther, Tenet, and the previous two Creeds that scored Shirley his own scoring breakout with The Book of Boba Fett and the hilarious Broken Bones of Jackass Forever. Now, Joseph Shirley truly has the golden belt with the 1-2 punch of Creed 3 and a new season of The Mandalorian. In the first round, Shirley fashions a powerhouse score that blends song production beatdowns with the gladiatorial symphonic spirit of OG Rocky composer Bill Conti, choreographing a titanically vengeful boxing match with as much emotion as throttling melodic muscle with trumpeting fury and valor that's more than a worthy continuation to a saga's musical legacy. For the new adventures of Mando and Grogu, Shirley takes the force spirit of John Williams and ventures to entirely new musical paths of the Star Wars universe to hear scoring that's exotic, adventurous, and mystical. But that is the way in the ring and a galaxy far, far away for one of scoring's freshest and most exciting voices that confidently and exhilaratingly is going for the title belt of universally enduring Hollywood franchises.
And now here's the composer with an ear of the tiger in the corner for Adonis Creed, not to mention Django and Grogu's. Welcome to Film Music Live, Joseph Shirley.
Thank you, Daniel. That was such a great introduction and much appreciated. I feel like we're caught up. Maybe we're done here. That was about it. That's about everything.
You had to get out of here. We're over. How did you end up in this insane place you are with literally a 1-2 punch, Creed 3 and Mandalorian season 3, like in the same week?
Yeah.
How did you get here?
It's definitely, still a surprise to me, and it's something that I'm very grateful for and feel very blessed. But like I would just put it back to a lot of hard work, working with good people. Ludwig Göransson is my mentor and friend, and he likes pushing people, and thankfully enough, he trusts me to carry the torch on these, amazing franchises of which I've, just been a fan of for so long, my entire life. So, I mean, I do feel, very blessed, but also I know that I worked really hard and dedicated, my life to this. So I hope that folks can feel that and resonate with that in the music that I contribute to these, wonderful franchises.
How did you end up with Ludwig, or what was the path you took to get you there?
Yeah, well, I went to USC for their screen scoring program. It's a really phenomenal program. It's actually the same program that Ludwig went through when he was a student as well. So he needed an assistant, and this would have been 2014. Yeah, and I graduated and didn't have a job and didn't know what I was going to be doing, and it is a program that really prepares you for trying to find an assistantship. So luckily there was a great community there, and Ludwig's studio reached out, and I had a meeting with him, and luckily it went well. But I started working with him, and just over the course of time, he would get busier and I would take on more and try to help him in whatever ways he needed. So it was just a natural progression there.
What's the trick to kind of rising through the ranks to get to this point?
Oh man, I mean, I do feel like everybody has their own journey. There's not one, method. There's not one road to take. I have many composer friends who just go it alone, and they're doing really phenomenal stuff. For me, it made more sense to really like learn the craft under somebody who I respected a lot, like Ludwig. But as far as for the first like 4 years I was working for Ludwig, it was just me and him. So I mean, there wasn't necessarily any like like rising of the ranks throughout the team, because it was just a two-person team. But he just, again, if he trusts in you, he would help you to take on more responsibility in certain areas like that. Yeah. And it's something that I try to take on in my young career now too. It's like, I have one assistant, and we're able to work on these projects together. And, I hope one day to, help him, find material that he can contribute to as well.
I think the thing for a really good kind of composer who gets the additional music credit by before he gets his own title shot, as it were, is to write in their voice, where it's not like you're listening to a score and then it's like, what's that? This is not that composer.
Right.
How do you learn like the moves, as it were, to be able to flow with whatever Ludwig is doing?
I think it certainly helps to have studied a lot of music. I'm not boasting in any way when I say that. It's more or less just like I really do enjoy analyzing music and breaking it down and trying to learn music. And I play piano, so I grew up really trying to figure. If I heard a song I loved, I tried to figure out the chord progression and learn how to play it, and learn what went into it. But that went on into my classical music background and piano performance and composition. But like really trying to like analyze music, that's still a joy for me. Is like, if I hear a great song on the radio, I'm constantly, I can't not try to analyze it if I like it. It's just one of those things. So being with Ludwig, it's a constant analysis. It's a constant music theory education, and whomever you work with, it's a constant analysis. I think that just kind of goes into it, and over the course of time, one can sort of like learn the building blocks of groove, rhythm, harmony, melody that someone more typically leans to, and you can kind of take on those tools as part of your own toolkit. I think that helped a lot in certain ways for Ludwig to help usher me into projects when he knew that I could sort of like be a chameleon in certain areas like that.
And I really noticed your own work when you started on the Book of Boba Fett, which I really dug. What was it, the torch being passed like, and how much freedom were you given to chart your own musical path in the Disney Plus Star Wars universe?
I mean, I would say I had pretty much free reign. It was more or less was Ludwig contributed a great main theme for that show, and but apart from that, it was more or less just taking notes and direction from John and from Dave and from Robert. I mean, those guys are some of the greatest collaborators to ever make movies and TV shows. Like I think that they were the ones that sort of like gave free reign to me as far as contributing music to that show and trying to help tell the same story that they're telling, while trying to give your own spin on it. So I had a great theme to work with. I had some previous themes for everybody who's seen the show. Obviously there are episodes in the book of Boba Fett that are kind of like Mando 2.5, Mando season 2.5. So there was a lot of already existing iconic material to play with, and I knew those Mando seasons so intimately, having worked on them, what was really fun and the trick was like, how do we make this feel fresh and feel different, and so I definitely leaned into more of the tribal sort of savage, nature of the Boba Fett character, and the mysticism of him, and the mysterious quality that he so effectively sort of carried throughout the entire Star Wars galaxy. It was very fun. It was a lot of fun.
Now we had a bang up premiere of Mandalorian season 3 last week, which leads us to our first question from Martin Fiala. Now, when can we expect the Mandalorian season 3 soundtrack, and how many new themes did you get the chance to create for the third season? I mean, obviously we're at the beginning of it, so.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my job to announce when it comes out, but I will say there will be a soundtrack. It's not going to take too long for you guys to hear it and be able to listen to it. I'm very excited that there will be a soundtrack. As far as themes, there's several new themes and several themes that were existing that I sort of expanded upon. But there's one in particular that I really sort of buckled down on, and it's for Bo-Katan. She did have a motif in Mandalorian season 2. The if you guys remember that, and I sort of just took that motif, that sort of angular separated arpeggio, and sort of fleshed that out in a certain way. It extended it and flipped it and sort of built upon it in that sort of way, because her character, she needed a lot more of a one thing that John specifically asked for was for her to have a bit more of like a humanity to her sound. Like that motif from season 2 was so aggressive, and she's obviously a very talented Mandalorian, and she has this new flavor to her sound musically back in season 2, but we wanted to sort of give her a bit more of a robust and sort of like just something that can be expanded upon in a more symphonic way. And so that's a theme that I'm excited for folks to get their ears on.
Now Mando's thrust in this is going to be redemption for taking that darn face mask off.
Yep.
So how is that emotionally going to play into the third season?
I can't say too much, but it's a crucial part of his story and his journey. But really, for me, what it boils down to is just Mando and Grogu's relationship. That was just such a pivotal part of their connection, the fatherhood and I guess, child relationship, that musically just trying to support that bond that they share now. That like Mando shed his his religious beliefs in order to connect with this child. And that means a hell of a lot, and it just musically just trying to support their love and their bond for each other. Cause they're inseparable now, especially, Grogu spent, I don't know how long it was, maybe a couple of years. I don't know the timeline of it. I'm sure that Jon Favreau could expand upon this, but how much time he spent with Luke, and for them to be apart for that long, and for Mando to finally have him back, and Grogu to meet up with him at the end of the Book of Boba Fett. That bond is strong, and it seems like inseparable now. So there are moments where musically I chose to sort of lean in on very well-known themes at this point to sort of support their love for each other in that sort of way.
No, very, very true. So on to Creed, you worked with with Ludwig on the first 2 Creed scores on Black Panther, which again brings us to this really pretty amazing score. And Louis Versinelli would love to know, when working on the soundtrack scores for Creed 1 and 2 with Ludwig, and now working solo on Creed 3, you're basically have come full circle. What were there any experiences you were able to take away from the first 2 film scores for Creed that helped you craft the score for Creed 3?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is for full circle. As I've said earlier, part of my story is assisting Ludwig. The first movie I worked on for Ludwig was Creed 1. So it's special in a lot of ways for me. So thanks for noticing that. The experience working on Creed 1 and 2, my role switched as it went on. I was definitely just there to help Ludwig on the first two, you know, whatever he needed. In a lot of ways, it was like learning the craft of how to deliver a film score. Really, as on the first one, it's, you know, there's so many orchestral sessions and there's so much preparatory work that needs to go into things, and you have to be so organized and just so on top of things when you're an assistant. So really, like, truly, it was like a being thrown into the fire type learning experience for me, because that was pretty intense, and it was such a beautiful score. I didn't want to be any part to take away from that on Creed 1. You know, I mean, it was like it was definitely growing pains for me to learn how to, you know, record a score and keep it all organized and just deliver it, you know. And then Creed 2, I was helping out a little bit more creatively, which was great. That was a really great experience. But I mean, an overall thing that I think I could pull from those two experiences was sort of, you know, and one thing I wanted to do with the score for Creed 3 is still sort of honor the legacy of these movies and the original creators, you know. So I did want to tip my hat to Ludwig in certain ways musically, and I also wanted to tip my hat in certain ways to Bill Conti, you know, who totally, you know, established the sound for the beginnings of what Creed has now become, you know. So I mean, I took a lot of that musically and wanted to sort of, you know, respectfully, you know, sort of mention that musically in certain ways. And that experience wouldn't have been as easy had I not worked on the first two, I would say. I've been so close to this character Adonis Creed for so long too, that I think I was trying to be as sort of, you know, nuanced and subtle about supporting his character on screen and knowing, you know, the sound that he's sort of carried for the first couple movies, you know. So in one, you know, on the one hand, we wanted to give it a new spin, but on the other hand, it was like still like sort of like saying, you know, this is some great material. This is a great legacy. Let's stay true to it in certain ways.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
The one thing that really strikes me about this is, you know, it's the saying always goes, "This time it's personal," but
Yeah.
in this movie, it really is personal. And as much as I, you know, might love Mr. T and, you know, Drago, I think that Damien, the character, is the most developed antagonist, if momentary supervillain, that any of the Rocky characters have faced. How did you want to play into the humanity of this guy who isn't like this kind of paper cut bad guy?
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Majors, man, just a brilliant actor, and a brilliant direction from Michael. I mean, they were such a powerhouse of a team on screen. I remember seeing the film for the first time, like the editor's cut, and that opening scene right towards the beginning of the movie when they sit down in the diner and just have their sort of catch up, reconnect conversation, and just how beautifully it was shot and performed with no music in it, you know. And Jonathan's performance against Mike's, and the way that they were playing off each other, it was just so subtly beautiful, you know. But, you know, and focusing on Dame, it was more or less, you know, here's a guy coming up from Adonis's past. You know, there's nostalgia there. There's like hazy memories. There's shared trauma. They went through this terrible childhood trauma together that, you know, all of those sort of aspects, I think, fed into a direction that I chose to take with Dame, which was, you know, a little bit more of a mysterious sort of hazy ambient sound for him. And I brought in some saxophone players here into my studio, and I just kind of had them sample, you know, I had them play certain things, and we experimented a bit, but I really sampled them pretty extensively for like a full day, and sort of took those as building blocks to sort of support the mystery of Dame. And you can't really pin him down. You don't know his motives really at the beginning of the movie. And obviously as the movie goes on, it obviously becomes dubious methods to get what he wants, you know? So, I mean, I wanted to play into that darkness, and for some reason it was just like a real soft ambient note on saxophone. It has so much power in it. and it has such a distinct quality, maybe just because it's that sort of like breathy, airy sound that I've just always loved in particular. But it sort of matched with Dame, and I sort of ran with that. It's like he has a motif that I played in certain ways. Towards the end of the film, it's a little bit more brassy and big and robust. But towards, at the beginning of the film, when we don't really know what he's up to, but we don't quite trust him either. He's a bit threatening. I had it mostly played on saxophones and some of the string orchestra to sort of support that nostalgia and dubious, questionable motives. Yeah.
Now, in terms of specific instruments, we've got a question from Billy Kaiser. I'm a guitarist, and I want to ask you about your approach using guitar in your scoring and writing.
I'm a terrible guitar player, but I am a guitar player. I'm more proficient on bass guitar, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, I love using guitar. I usually try to use guitar in ways that you can tell it's not a guitar, because I don't trust myself playing a really, either a screaming solo or anything like that. Like I'll layer in guitars just to give it that sort of quality and have that sort of analog, true instrument feel to it and give it that sort of grit. But a lot of times you won't hear much, great guitar playing in my stuff. But I do really enjoy playing with pedals. So a lot of times I'll try to make a guitar sound more like a synth, or the other way around. So like there are some sounds throughout the Creed score that is me playing guitar. Actually, let me see. I'm gonna grab this. It's a Mando. I got a Mando cello for the Boba Fett show. Might be out of tune. Yeah, but it's tuned like a cello, just in fifths. And for each string, there's, you get the unisons, and it gives it a really weird quality. But I used this throughout the Boba Fett show, but I decided to send this. It also has a pickup. So I sent this through a bunch of my pedals, and that became sort of, for me, a signature sound for the Creed score that you can't quite tell is a synth or vocals maybe, or guitar. Like it just sort of sounds like a thing, and it was just a nice textural quality. So a lot of times if you do catch something that sounds like a guitar, it's usually me trying to make something unique or distinct in a way that's not like featured guitar playing. I wish I was a better guitar player, and it's something that I've worked on for a long time, but I'm definitely more of a keyboardist. I'd say that.
Well, I always sensed there was a bit of a sand person in Damien, so now you
Yeah. Right.
What was it like collaborating with Michael B. Jordan?
It was amazing, man. We spent the better part of a year together. He came into this room like, every Friday. We always got together on Friday mornings. It was, this was his first first directing job, first directorial debut. And, he spent so much time with the editors that, like, when he showed up on Friday mornings here to my studio, it was always just such a treat, because I think he liked getting into this room and just talking about music, and it's with any department on a movie. I would assume, I've never, obviously never directed anything, but I would assume that you were constantly talking about the heart of the story, whether it's VFX or the edit or, I don't know, ADR. Like it's everything helps tell the story that the director wants, and helps support that vision. But there's something special, I think, about music. Is it's very difficult to not just immediately get into the heart of the story, because it's all about, it's more directly about, like, how does this make you feel? I mean, everything makes you feel a certain way. Every department helps the audience feel a certain way. But with music, it's something that's, just so direct, and so, it exists sort of outside of the movie too. That it was, we had a lot of like emotional and exciting and fun and kind of scary moments throughout that year together, because we were talking about, like, how does this make you feel? So, and what, how do we want the audience to feel at this moment in time? So it was a very it was very fun for him to experience that for the first time. It was very fun for me to work with him because he's such like a talented artist and such a great collaborator. He was very trusting in what I was doing and really wanted to experiment a lot. One of the cool things I think about working with Michael was that he has such a history of being on screen and acting, and even live, like responding to people and improvising and everything, that like a lot of times he was, he wore his director hat and his actor hat when he was working here with me. There were times where he would give me notes as if I were an actor as well. And like I was sort of performing live with the actors on screen. So, I mean, it was a very direct, I felt like I was very close to the story with him because it was a very direct way of sort of giving feedback. We're watching him with Jonathan Majors and their interplay. And we were sort of like building some of these cues almost live together because, he preferred for it to feel that close and direct and, sort of, nuanced in that way. It was really interesting. And then, towards the end, he was there for everything. He was at the scoring sessions. He was there for the final dub, of course. And just watching him grow as a director who now understands what music can do. I think we both learned a lot from each other. It was really incredible. Yeah.
I mean, I particularly loved how incredibly well shot the film was for IMAX.
Yeah.
Definitely go see this film in the big screen in IMAX. But again, it has something I've never seen in any Rocky film, which is this incredibly surreal fight sequence that takes place
right.
in their own. What was it? Tell me about scoring that.
Yeah, that was. I worked very hard on that on that sequence, and we tried many different ideas there. One thing that Mike envisioned for that scene is for it to feel. I mean, his token term for that bit was like, I want it to feel like performance art. He wanted it to feel like something sort of nightmarish, but also sort of stage music. Essentially we sort of came around to the idea of really featuring vocalists throughout many cues. Sometimes it was me sampling myself, other times it was me sampling other singers, but for that scene we really wanted a featured female vocalist. And a lot of that had to do with just the fact that Michael's great idea was for it to feel like concert music, almost as if there's a singer on stage or in the ring with these two boxers commenting on what they're going through and what they're dealing with in the midst of this fight, kind of like a Greek chorus. It's like the singer, an amazing singer who I brought in here to the studio. Her name is Maya Sykes. She's a good friend. She came in and we sampled her singing over an idea of a cue that I had, and sort of placed her at really crucial moments in that fight to sort of be our Greek chorus. And this, Mike really wanted that scene to feel like a Greek tragedy. So once we had the orchestral and choir sessions, I really leaned on the choir to sort of add that breadth and that, that scope of what these two fighters are going through. And I thought it really came out, pretty effective. I hope people like it. I mean, it's like, it was one of those things that we were talking about that scene for so long, and we tried so many different things, but it really sort of opened up once we got Maya in here, and we sort of, on the fly, sort of like asked her to do certain things. Like, it was late at night. I think it was like on a Saturday night, probably like 10 p.m. We brought her in. All these lights were off. I don't know. We were just sort of like, all right, let's get into it, and we were kind of, in the middle of it. I put a TV in front of Maya and just let her watch this scene. She was the first person outside of like anyone working on the movie to really see it. And she was very moved by the fight. And so she was responding to it in certain ways, and I was having her sing certain things. And then Mike was getting her to go really high and really low. And we were just trying all these fun things. And it totally just opened up with her performance, and, I sort of built a cue around what she did. Yeah.
Now, Dale would like to know, did the kale salads from Mixto make you a better composer?
Oh, Dale. Yeah. It's funny. I haven't had a kale salad from Mixto in a long time because I'm now in Burbank, but I've been trying to find a replacement for it. But Mixto truly Mixto has made a big impact on all the music that ever has been created out of a very special studio owned by Theodore Shapiro, where we all worked. Teddy's studio is like right around the corner from this amazing like Tex-Mex spot, and they just have the best salad. So in there they put something addictive into it. I don't know what it is, but you kind of get the hankering for it every once in a while. You're like, I really need one of those salads. I really need one today, So we've eaten hundreds and hundreds of kale salads. I don't know if it improved my music on this, but I'm definitely looking to go back soon. Thank you, Dale.
You gotta get the tender greens in Toluca.
Oh, yeah.
You'll be okay there.
Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned about, I really loved how you brought the idea of song production into the score. It kind of feels like an R&B album at certain points, especially because Creed's wife is a hugely popular singer.
I just love working with vocals, to be honest. It's such a direct way to get into the heart of a piece of music, and I think it's, for me, like I've grown up singing, and it's just a very for me, it's a very effective way to like add feeling into music is to have vocals featured in there. I think there's also something like pre-musical about it, where not everybody, I mean, this is kind of a funny way to put it, but like not everybody could play a piano or play a violin, but everybody has a voice and can create a sound. So I think it's something you connect to a little bit more like immediately when you hear somebody singing. And even for this score, it just feels sort of like classic in certain ways, but also it sort of contemporizes the sound of it. So I really did love working with vocals on many of these cues. One cue in particular that really was fun to write was the funeral scene, where I sort of had something sketched out, and I had Maya sing on it, who I mentioned before, and then I had the choir back her up and back me up, with a really beautiful choral sound. But yeah, I mean, it had sort of like a gospel feel to it. I was a music director at a church in New Orleans for like 7 years before I came out here to LA, and a lot of times, like, the most moving music you could possibly play was gospel music, and I just sort of grew up on that, being from Mississippi, gospel and blues and everything. And it's such an immediate feeling for me. And I think it, hopefully folks think it worked in this movie, that funeral scene in particular, we definitely took a gospel approach to it.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely really, really effective. I think if the spirit of Bill Conti is in your score, and it really is, he brought this kind of what you could call a gladiatorial sound to the boxing sequences in this. It's really right up and center. I mean, like, how do you just construct the music of a boxing sequence? Like, do you take a holistic approach, or kind of like, okay, the emotion's here, then it's here? Or do you like literally map it out before you even attempt it?
I was trying to definitely pay homage to Bill, and just the incredible stuff that he wrote for the Rocky franchises. I was trying to pay homage to Ludwig for the amazing stuff that he's contributed as well, and it, learned a lot from those first two movies of like how and when to play certain emotions. And I do think the final fight in Creed 3 is really, really special, just because of Michael's direction and how he wanted to craft it. But essentially it was us deciding, where's the emotional moments, where's the moments where you feel like you need to run through a brick wall, where are the moments that are just tension. And I would say most of the final fight in this movie is straight up just tension and suspense. And then right towards the end, essentially after Adonis is able to pick himself back up off his, from his bootstraps and like really go for it, when you can feel that he's about to succeed, that's when we really leaned in on something more heroic and tried to build out that sort of I'm about to run through a brick wall type of sound. And it was different, because you think back on the Rocky movies and you think back on Creed 1 and 2, there are longer expanses of like the emotional quality of the music in the midst of these fights. But for ours, it felt more right to just play tension for longer, because it maybe in a certain way, it sort of lended itself into like sort of cheering for both guys a little bit, you know? And I think that was something that Michael wasn't afraid of happening. Like we have Adonis, our hero, and when our hero is about to win, let's play the heroicism, you know, and leading up to that moment, let's play the heroicism. But for the majority of it, it's just kind of this nightmarish, sort of tense, suspenseful, you know, boxing match where you don't really know who's going to win. We wanted to keep people sort of, you know, on the edge of their seats in certain ways. And then after our hero wins, you know, go to Bill Conti, go for the greats, you know, play Ludwig's theme, but go for the greats. You know, it's like these are tried and true methods of, you know, how you add the emotional landscape to these fights, you know. What was very cool about what Michael wanted to do in ours was like, you think back on the Rocky movies and the other Creeds, it's like you usually watch maybe the first 2 rounds in real time as an audience. You know, you watch maybe round 1 and round 2, and then there's a montage where you kind of skip through all the other stuff and you see who's sort of winning, who's sort of who's losing and everything. And then you come back right in, you know, at like round 11 or round 12. And like, that's usually like the structure of these final boxing matches. But with what Mike wanted to build was like, he wanted to build the void, you know, that's when the crowd totally goes away. You kind of lose your sense of time and place. You're just dealing with these guys like emotional journeys in this, you know. That was how he put his own spin on the normal Rocky and Creed structure, was instead of going into a montage where you still see folks really, you know, boxing through the rounds and you're still somewhat there in real time with them, everything goes away and it's more of a nightmare, you know. And I just thought it was very well done on his part. He really, you know, put his own spin on it.
I mean, you know, every Rocky film is, you know, got to have the montage, the training
Yeah.
montage sequence. And what's interesting here is that, you know, the song element is in the score itself, as opposed to, you know, doing a music video, which it just makes Rocky 4 so great. No, and it's even a better film now. But what's the trick for you to do the montage training sequence?
Yeah, building anticipation. That was something I was hoping that would come across, is like, it feels anticipatory. You know, I would say the first 2 minutes of the montage, we wanted to sort of, one thing they did want to do is like, Adonis struggles. Adonis is at his lowest point. Adonis then succeeds. That was kind of like the 3 parts of the montage. And because of this movie and because of the way it was laid out, maybe Adonis struggles that section of the montage for me was a little bit more about just building anticipation and still having an emotional through line. Like, this movie is so emotional to me. And it was something that we definitely, Michael and I, built out together with the score. It was like, we wanted to add the emotional element to this. The beginning of our montage feels kind of like anticipatory, but also emotional. Like, I had a piano arpeggio and some choir shouts that sort of, you know, something's building, and you're psyched for it. Like, at that point in the movie, you're just so psyched to see some crazy action. You know, Adonis is already at his lowest point. He just lost his mother. He has a sit down with his wife, Bianca, and she says, you know, you might as well go for it. And he says, well, the only thing he's going to do is, you know, he's not listening anymore. I got to fight him. So, you know, it's coming, and just trying to like give it a different spin for this movie and feel that sort of, that propulsion and that momentum was pretty key at the beginning of the montage. We had an amazing song called Heavy as the Head that we knew we wanted to feature. And I decided to put that right, you know, in the middle of the montage, right at his lowest point in the scope of that sequence, where everybody's just like, I don't think he's got it. You know, he's down in the dumps. The champ is no more, but he still, you know, is able to sort of pull himself back up and get back into it. And from that point on, it becomes that big heroic orchestral moment, and an amazing vocal by J. Cole, this, you know, a rapper who I've worshipped forever. You know, he's one of the greatest MCs of all time. he basically rapped over that Dr. Dre beat. So it was sculpting all of those pieces together and trying to find a way that they tell the story of that 7-minute sequence and have it still make sense, So I had little motifs that I would go back to and sort of remind the audience what we're building off of. And but yeah, just trying to have it feel like a big moment, an anticipatory moment, a big, heroic gesture by the end of it when he finally assumes his mantle back as champ at the Hollywood sign. Yeah.
Now, jumping back into the Star Wars universe,
Yeah.
for you, what's the big difference? I mean, I assume that we're gonna be reading more chapters from the Book of Boba Fett after Mandalorian, but what's the big difference between those who wear the crown of the Mandalorian between these two characters? What to you is the biggest difference between Mando and Boba Fett?
Mando has Grogu, and there's just an amazing connection between him and Grogu. That's a big difference. I think the shows themselves have a bit of a different quality too, definitely musically. Boba Fett was his backstory is so tribal, and mystical in certain ways, and for Din Djarin, it's there's so much more that's tied up with him and this little baby. And the types of episodes that John and Dave so like brilliantly create for the Mandalorian have a bit of a different quality in what they want to do with the tropes and things like that. Like there's always the Western through line in both shows, but they sort of present it in different ways. I think the scope of Mandalorian season 3 is just getting a lot bigger, like without saying too much. Musically, it's getting a bit more robust. We recorded a bit of a bigger orchestra for this season, and as the season progresses, there are new characters that come in that sort of support that scope. And it's really amazing. It's this season. I don't know how much I can say, but it's about like setting aside differences and working together, and musically, I hope that I supported that sort of vision that John and Dave and Rick had. It really gets, into a bigger, more, it's almost like a political question, or, it's like there's so much about it where we could set aside any sort of belief systems that we have if we can all work towards one goal together.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing, how again you are now scoring two of the most popular franchises in film and just pop culture history. I imagine you grew up just being a huge fan of Rocky and Star Wars as a kid. But how important do you think is it for your next generation of composers to pay tribute to what's come before, but at the same time just kind of throw off those shackles and just go for something new?
Right. Well, I will begin my answer by saying how blessed and grateful I feel for this experience. I mean, there's so many people that have pushed me and helped me along, Ludwig being the most, carrying that torch. So I mean, I do feel very grateful, but I do know that I worked very hard to earn that trust. So it is. I would say that Creed 3, just focusing on Creed 3, it's like this movie to me feels different than any of the Rockies and any of the Creeds. It does feel like a new beginning. I mean, kind of obviously, like Sylvester Stallone's not in it. I mean, he produced it. He was one of the producers on it, but he wasn't around. And what's encouraging, at least for me as a fan and as part of the audience of this franchise, was the fact that it still seems like people are positively, walking away from this movie saying we liked it, we loved it, or whatever. It's kind of incredible that being the response without Sylvester Stallone, but it is kind of carving a new path. Like I'm excited to see what whatever the next movie becomes, what direction they want to take it in. Because it's a new start, I would say. And like having all of Michael's anime references gives it its own flavor. with, just being a fan. I'll say this, like being a fan of Star Wars since I was a kid, being a fan of Rocky since I was a kid. This is, these are the two greatest experiences of my life. Like 2022 for me was the greatest experience of my life, was being able to work on these franchises and pour myself into them and love them, because I've just been a fan for so long. And I hope that they continue to make more stories and build on that legacy, but make it new. I mean, a lot of, I'll just give a short anecdote, but like, I was at a writing session for the songs for Creed, and a lot of the songwriters and artists there were basically like, we're crazy about Creed. I don't think I've ever seen a Rocky. And I was like, what? But they, for the new generation, I would say like Creed is the Rocky. So that, to give you any context, it's like we're already sort of like supporting this new legacy and this new foundation of Adonis Creed. And with Star Wars, it's like I was watching Star Wars as a kid, just hundreds of times. I mean, that's why I got into film music. That's why I fell in love with it, was John Williams music. And then lo and behold, I started working for Ludwig, and he's doing a Star Wars show. it's like, these are, lifer moments for me that I'll never forget, So I just feel, this has been a crazy year. I would say this last week has been insanely thrilling for me. I think I'm probably going to like sleep for 3 weeks after this, but anyway, I just hope that fans love and cherish these shows and these movies as much as I do, Yeah.
Well, Joseph, you've done a great job, man. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. Creed 3 is now in theaters. With Joseph's score is available on Sony Music. And a big thanks to Alex Speck-Weinstein, Jana Davidoff, Maria Kleinman, Holly Battaglia, and Jamie Bertel. And thanks to Mark Northam, Mark Banning, and our producer, Dale Turner. I will be seeing you on round 12 at Film Music Live.
Thank you, Daniel. See you guys.